Okay, I'm going to give it to you straight. Donald Trump is the most persuasive human I have ever observed. Oh, hold on. Yep, I felt the same way when I read that for the first time too. But what if I told you that in the next few minutes, I would show you 3 invisible ninja-like skills that Donald Trump uses on a daily basis that makes him almost always win, even when he may appear to lose. Now get ready for your mind to be blown because we're about to thought hack this orange ball of fury. Go! So the real question is this. How are everyday people like us who aren't born with a silver spoon, or into the perfect business, or into the perfect body, or into the perfect circumstances? How do we transform into the person who has those perfect results? How do we unlock that X factor that makes the best of the best, the very best of the best? How do we reverse engineer that and then make it a part of us? That is the question, and ThoughtHacker TV will give you the answer. Hi, my name is Roland Vanatta, and welcome to ThoughtHacker Secrets. Welcome all you thought hackers out there. My name is Roland Vanatta, and I want to begin the first episode of ThoughtHacker Secrets with a word of warning. If you pay attention to these strategies, you will no doubt want to use them to your advantage. Be extra careful. These tools are extremely effective and can be very easily misused in unethical ways. Remember that thought hacking is about improving yourself for the betterment of you, your family, your business, and ultimately the world. Every tool can be used for good or for evil. But as thought hackers, we believe the baby should not be thrown out with the bathwater. We believe that we not only have the responsibility to learn how to identify these weapons-grade persuasion skills, as Scott Adams puts it, but also how to employ these tools both morally and wisely. Now, before we get too deep, I want you to think back, go back in time for a moment, to a time that you wanted to win something. Maybe you were crushing on someone, and you just wanted them to notice you. Perhaps it was to win respect. Maybe you wanted to impress a girl, a group of friends, or influence a certain group of people. Maybe even now, you just want to influence yourself. You want to win that conversation in your head that keeps you lazy and unmotivated, procrastinating over and over and over and over again. Pay special attention, my friends. This video is for you. And if after the video you want to geek out and dig even deeper on this subject, like me, I highly recommend the book Win Bigly, Persuasion in a World Where Facts Don't Matter by Scott Adams and Robert Cialdini's book Persuasion. I'll drop the links to those books in the descriptions as they both heavily influenced this video. Okay? Are you ready? Breathe in. Love him or hate him, if we're being honest, Donald J. Trump has had an impressive consistency in regards to winning.
I've got a background in hypnosis, and I've studied persuasion for decades as part of my job, and I see in him more persuasion power than I've ever seen in one human being. It's a collection of skills that all work together to be very persuasive.
Think about it. He started his career by turning $1 million into billions, built skyscrapers, hotels, and businesses across the world, became the star of a #1 rated reality TV show, became a multiple New York Times best-selling author, and won the 45th presidency of the United States of America. Now, if we're honest, we have to conclude that with all these wins, complex wins, stacking, and continuing to stack, Donald Trump is either A, the luckiest bastard ever, or B, he has some impressive, wicked-ass ninja skills up his sleeves that almost no one notices. So my goal for this video is to reveal 3 ninja-like skills that explain how Trump almost always wins in any given situation, especially when he may appear to lose. And then I'm going to show you how that you can apply some of these techniques to your own life. Now, I'll tell you this, once I learned how to recognize what he was doing, I couldn't help but appreciate the artistry that I've been persuaded is actually behind all the apparent chaos. See, the truth is, effective people are almost always persuasive, but persuasion comes with a price. And in order to be persuasive, you must first capture the attention of the people you wish to persuade. After all, you can't really persuade anybody if there is no one to persuade, right?
If we are paying attention to something, it's important. That's how we decide to pay attention. But a communicator can reroute our attention to something that isn't important, but make it seem important as a consequence.
So if attention is a persuasion expert's priority number one, then you also have to admit no one is better at grabbing attention than President Trump himself. If you just look at his life, it's shockingly apparent. For years, he's weaseled his way into television appearances, making cameos from Home Alone to Fresh Prince to Spin City to Little Rascals. He even wrestled for a little while on WWE. Then he made it to his very own #1 reality TV show, The Apprentice. But never did we see it on display as we saw him single-handedly steal the attention of every media outlet throughout the nation and the world throughout and beyond the election cycle. And he did it at almost half the price of the Clinton campaign. Now, one of my mentors always says results tell the truth, and according to the New York Times, Clinton spent a whopping $565 million losing the race to the White House, while Trump won, spending only $322 million. Now, we could explore a long list of theories to explain how all this was possible, but I'm going to hypothesize that he did it using these three invisible ninja-like skills of persuasion. The first of which I will call polarized emotional attention. Now, polarized emotional attention simply means being willing to make an emotionally polarizing statement like this:
we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself,
in order to get attention and reactions like this.
He wasn't a president, he was a preacher up there, given his dark world view.
It's really frightening to hear an American president talk about obliterating any other country.
The rhetoric was irresponsible. It was put many world leaders on edge, and frankly, it was contradictory in many places.
I'd call it a simplistic axis of evil speech on steroids.
So he's got all the methods, but on top of that, he's got this gigantic personality and apparently an appetite for risk and ability to withstand withering criticism that just takes him to another level of effectiveness.
You're right. Withering criticism is a good way to put it, because he just keeps going, and he just sort of takes the blows as mainstream media and his critics keep on attacking him.
Yeah, he seems to get stronger. And one of his tricks is that he'll take all the attention away from everything else until he's the most important conversation point. And as long as you're only talking about him or only talking about the things that will help him, he's got an advantage.
Now, after watching hours and hours and hours of Trump video footage, I've been persuaded that almost all of what appears crazy and unacceptable by most Trump critics is almost entirely functional and deliberate and artistically crafted by him.
Well, I think without the rhetoric, we wouldn't have been here. I really believe that. You know, we did sanctions and all of the things that you would do, but I think the rhetoric, I hated to do it. Sometimes I felt foolish doing it, but we had no choice.
So strategically you were doing it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think he gained respect. You know, he's a strong guy.
President Trump and North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un finished an unprecedented meeting in Singapore with a deal to start denuclearizing the Korean peninsula. The two leaders signed what Mr. Trump called a comprehensive document detailing what he said was their commitment to establish relations.
Now, it's a bit obvious that getting attention is important, but perhaps what might not be quite as obvious is that the best way, and sometimes the only way, to grab it is to operate in what Scott Adams calls a narrow band of wrongness.
So step one, get attention. And the way he does that is he operates in what I call a narrow band of wrongness, meaning that if this is appropriate behavior, he just takes it up to this band. Mm-hmm.
Now, it's when Trump speaks and acts in such a way that just isn't quite right. So it makes you pause and think about it just a bit longer than you normally would. It just doesn't sound quite right. So it creates a feeling. It creates a judgment by whoever hears it.
You know, with the nicknames and the provocative things he says. But he never goes up here where you'd get impeached, you'd be put in the insane asylum and start a nuclear war. If you look how long he's been doing this, and how consistently he stays in that narrow band of wrongness, which is persuasion perfection, because you can't look away, and then you're thinking about what he wants you to think about.
And Trump does this all the time. Sometimes he does it by being politically incorrect.
Lion Ted. What's your name? My name's Lion Ted Cruz.
Sometimes by misspelling words.
President Trump knows we're watching his tweets with eagle eyes.
If I do a typo, it's like death. They go wild.
But it was the president who went wild, misspelling.
Sometimes by gesturing.
This is a tough business to run for president.
I know, you're a tough guy, Jeb.
And we need to have a leader that is progressive.
Sometimes by being extra provocative.
The former president of Mexico, Vicente Fox, he said today, and I'm quoting him, he said, "I'm not going to pay for that, quote, effing wall." How are you going to make them pay for the wall?
I will, and the wall just got 10 feet taller, believe me. It's got 10 feet taller.
And sometimes just swimming against the stream.
Is there anyone on stage, and can I see hands, who is unwilling tonight to pledge your support to the eventual nominee of the Republican Party and pledge to not run an independent campaign against that person? Again, we're looking for you to raise your hand now. Raise your hand now if you won't make that pledge tonight. Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump, to be clear, you're standing on a Republican primary debate.
I fully understand.
Now, I'm sure you noticed that as he refused to pledge that he will not run as an independent, he immediately drew attention to who? Himself. And he did so by polarizing himself against all the other candidates by an action that elicited an emotional reaction. Notice that by polarizing himself this way, he sticks out like a sore thumb, making half the people cheer with entertainment, woo, and the other half scowl with disapproval. He shouldn't do that. Both of which is an emotional reaction. Now, don't miss this, because we get primed as a species thinking about things we have strong feelings about. This is well known in playwright and screenwriting circles. Conflict elicits emotion. Now, one of the most important things I've ever learned is that when someone can create an emotional reaction in someone else, they then have direct access to that person's subconscious mind, where virtually all of his or her decisions derive from. See, the human mind is programmed for patterns, and when those patterns are interrupted, the brain wakes up a bit and takes notice. Now, we as a species quickly become numb to expected stimuli, but we sit up and pay attention to those things that doesn't fit the pattern. Now, this makes perfect sense from a biological standpoint, because when your ancient ancestors came into contact with someone or something that they were unfamiliar with, they had better watch out, because it could very easily mean injury or death. One way of doing this in your own life is by simply wearing something just a bit out of character, which honestly feels just a bit off. Remember that narrow band of wrongness?
A narrow band of wrongness.
For example, anytime I ever go to any function, any social event, I always dress up just a bit more than what I expect everyone else to wear. If it's business casual, I may wear a bright blue 3-piece suit. Why? Because it creates polarized emotional attention. It gains me attention because I appear different than everyone else. This causes people to make snap judgments about me one way or the other. Some people compliment it and love it, while other people probably think I'm arrogant and egocentric. But either way, I get noticed, and if I want to make an impact whatsoever, I have to get attention first. Now, that's a super simple example, but I think you get the point. Now, let's watch him do it again with Megyn Kelly here.
You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals.
Now, what's interesting about this clip is that Megyn Kelly's question is itself designed to elicit emotion against Trump by trapping him in a no-win situation. If he denies his past statements, she will prove him wrong with his very own quotes. If he tries to explain the individual circumstances, he'll run out of time and look like a jerk. The setup is seamless. Anybody else in the same situation would literally have been ruined immediately. But watch how Trump deflates the question, and in doing so moves the emotional attention of the audience away from the question and onto something else.
You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. Your Twitter account...
Only Rosie O'Donnell.
No, it wasn't.
Now, did you notice how he wins the crowd in that exchange?
When he was answering questions about his comments about women, he mentioned Rosie O'Donnell, because you immediately go to that visual image and it takes you off the questions.
So Trump stole the attention from Megyn Kelly's question and redirected it to benefit himself. And he did it both visually and humorously, which we'll cover in Ninja-like skill number 2. Now, if you continue to watch Megyn Kelly, she actually attempts to finish her well-placed trap.
Your Twitter account has several disparaging comments about women's looks. You once told a contestant on Celebrity Apprentice it would be a pretty picture to see her on her knees. Does that sound to you like the temperament of a man we should elect as president? And how will you answer the charge from Hillary Clinton, who is likely to be the Democratic nominee, that you are part of the war on women?
I think the big problem this country has is being politically correct.
Now watch what happens next. Now that he has that emotional attention of the room, he immediately redirects it to his branding. Remember what I said earlier about the subconscious mind? This is the moment when the audience is most open to the next thing he says.
I've been challenged by so many people, and I don't frankly have time for total political correctness. And to be honest with you, this country doesn't have time either. This country is in big trouble. We don't win anymore. We lose to China. We lose to Mexico, both in trade and at the border. We lose to everybody. And frankly, what I say, and oftentimes it's fun, it's kidding, we have a good time, what I say is what I say.
He circles back to identifying with being politically incorrect, which makes his base feel like he is like them, an unpolished average Joe. Now, as a side note, Dr. Robert Cialdini, the premier and most respected researcher in the field of influence and persuasion, for years recognized 6 principles of influence. But recently, he is also recognizing a 7th principle that underlies all the others, and he calls it unity. He points out that we humans have a tendency to naturally fall into a kind of tribalism. When we identify with the family unit, we are much more willing to accept and take on the ideas that the unit believes. It's just how we're wired. So, right after Trump identifies with his tribe, he then echoes his message that America no longer wins, that America loses in every deal it makes, and imprints his message that he is a deal maker, and he's a winner in the mind of everyone listening.
We don't win with the military. We don't win on the border. We don't win with health care. We don't win with trade. If I'm elected president, we will win, and we will win, and we will win.
It wasn't random. He did it to reinforce his branding and to pull attention to the thing he wanted attention on.
Persuasion is about making somebody focus on your thing until they think it's important. Because the human brain is so dumb that it thinks whatever it pays attention to the most is the best.
Right.
Or the worst or the most important. But anyway, in their minds, its priority rises.
Now, honestly, think back to that only Rosie O'Donnell moment and answer this question. At the end of the night, which part of the debate echoed throughout every media outlet over the following days? Who would you say got the attention?
Safe to say it was the Donald Trump show tonight.
See, this is why nice guys finish last. Because nice guys aren't typically noticed as much. They don't get the attention. They want everyone to like them, and so they don't ever rock the boat. They never make polarizing statements. They never do polarizing things. So they never get the attention they crave. Now, I was like this for years, but began to notice that the most popular people, the most successful people in any area, are typically confident enough in their opinions to make those polarizing statements, regardless of how it makes others feel. And in doing so, they naturally take advantage of polarized emotional attention. And I would argue that Trump knows this, and that he might naturally actually be a nice guy. But he's learned that a branding like he has created will lend itself better results, despite its risks. Here's why.
They don't like that image.
They like to think of you as kind of a punk, kind of a sneering
They like to think
punk.
as a bad guy.
Yeah, bad guy.
They like a
tough
bad guy better.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
like the bad guy image better.
New York, it fits better with New York City.
It works
a tough
better.
guy.
Yeah, it works better, I guess. I don't like it, but I guess your friends in the media like it better.
Now, back to attention. There are literally hundreds of examples I could go through here. So start thinking about how that you can create polarized emotional attention in your life. But guys, don't be sloppy. Keep it ethical. Keep it moral. Keep it legal. It just takes a bit of imagination. And guess what that brings me to? Ninja skill number 2, imaginative reframing. Now, one of the most simple but yet most artistic forms of persuasion is someone's ability to reframe the way someone else thinks about a topic. Now, we humans think in pictures, and we form those pictures in our imagination. As someone tells us a story, we instantly and automatically build the scenario in our imagination. For example, I'll tell you a story that happened to me earlier today. I went to the grocery store to pick up some bread. And as I was walking by the produce department, I felt something hit me in the leg. So I looked down to see where it came from. And there was this old man running around the produce department, barefooted, literally throwing bananas, screaming, "No smoothies for me! No smoothies for me!" Okay, that didn't really actually happen to me. But if you noticed, when I was telling you the story, you built the scenes in your imagination as I gave you the individual pieces of the story. You saw the produce department, you imagined the banana, the old man being barefooted, throwing the bananas. And so the difference between an ordinary politician and Trump is like the difference between reading a textbook and a novel. One paints pictures in your mind and the other does not. That's basic storytelling. Trump is naturally an excellent storyteller. But what makes Trump operate at a completely different level than everyone else is that he layers this kind of imaginative storytelling by framing a comparison in which he is automatically seen as the hero. Let's go back just one more time to that Rosie O'Donnell moment because there is so much just layered into it. But first, understand that Megyn Kelly is no slouch at persuasion either. She's actually really, really good at it.
It is what you say immediately before you deliver your message that leverages your success tremendously.
And at this moment, she is attempting to persuade a specific group of people, Trump supporters, by imaginatively reframing how they see Trump. This is how she does it. She starts her story by identifying and echoing what Trump supporters like about him in the first place.
Mr. Trump, one of the things people love about you is you speak your mind and you don't use a politician's filter. However, that is not without its downsides, in particular when it comes to women.
This makes her appear to understand their position, and so they pay attention to her. Remember unity? Now, once she has their attention, she tries to reframe the way that same audience sees Trump by leading them to imagine Trump calling women in general these nasty names.
You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals.
Which will, of course, raise emotion in her favor and on to whatever she wants the conversation to be on. Don't miss this because this is excellent persuasion. She is attempting to reframe Trump as the villain and women as the oppressed hero. Any other politician would have drowned. But if you watch Trump as he listens to the question, he smiles. He adjusts his mic. See, as a persuasion expert, he sees what she's trying to do to him.
If you don't know what the tools are, you don't recognize them.
He even mentions it later.
And honestly, Megan, if you don't like it, I'm sorry. I've been very nice to you, although I could probably maybe not be based on the way you have treated me.
So how does Trump trump her excellent persuasion? Pun intended. He just blatantly interrupts her story and reframes the villain and the hero with only 3 words.
Only Rosie O'Donnell.
Only Rosie O'Donnell. And the crowd erupts.
No, it wasn't.
Why was that more effective imaginative reframing than Megyn Kelly's version? Well, because nearly everyone knows what Rosie O'Donnell looks like, and so they can imagine her. It's much harder to imagine women in general. It's not as personal of a term. What made this imaginative reframing all the more persuasive was that because Rosie was already a villain in the minds of most Republicans. She'd been so outspoken against Republicans in the past, she was already an enemy to their cause. And you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Trump knows that too. He just consciously took advantage of the situation and in the process gained even more solidarity with his Republican base. Now let's take it to a whole nother level. Perhaps Trump's most artistic way of utilizing imaginative reframing is by using what Scott Adams calls linguistic kill shots.
What I call linguistic kill shots.
Or what he also humorously calls your forever name.
Forever names, when you get your forever name, it isn't going away, folks. You're lying Ted forever.
How would you spell that? L-Y-E-N, lion.
It's also what most see as name-calling and childlike behavior.
They are nicknames designed to do more than just nick an opponent.
Linguistic kill shots are not just insults. That's what people thought in the first part. These are engineered.
That's the reason why I called it invisible ninja-like skills. But I'm going to let you in on the secret. We saw this over and over and over, but I'm going to use one example. The example of Jeb Bush. Now let's look at Jeb Bush. He's a calm, cool, and otherwise collected individual. His father was president. His brother was president. He himself was the governor of Florida. He arguably had more political experience than anyone else on stage. This is the type of guy that you would trust to have the nuclear codes. He's really the safest bet and Donald Trump's biggest competition. So what does the Donald do? He finds a word that is both unusual, remember that narrow band of wrongness?
A narrow band of wrongness.
And visually confirmative. And imaginatively reframes the way everyone sees Jeb Bush. And he does so with only 2 words. Now, I would argue that these 2 words almost single-handedly put Jeb out of the race. Now, understand that when Jeb began the race, he had lots and lots and lots of money. He was leading the polls and had a reputation for the most part of decency and integrity. After these 2 words were added to his name, his polls dropped to almost nothing. And soon after that, he was dropping out of the race entirely. So what was these magic 2 words? Are you ready for it? Low energy Jeb.
I defined him. I gave him this term, low energy. I said he's a low energy individual. We do not need in this country low energy. Jeb Bush is a low energy person. For him to get things done is hard. And he just doesn't have the energy. We need high energy people. You need a stronger temperament.
So he always goes for the visual, and our visual sense is our most persuasive part of our brain. When he talks about ISIS, he says they're putting people in cages and they're chopping off heads.
These people come in, they're fierce. I remember when Jeb would say that, gee, he's a little bit too strong. We need strength. They're cutting off people's heads in Syria and all over the Middle East. He happens to be a very nice person. As I've said, he's a low-energy person.
You might be thinking, how the heck those two words, those two innocent little words added to Jeb's name, how could that make that big of a difference?
Because we don't remember 99.99% of the things around us because our brains aren't big enough. You remember the exceptions.
Once the low energy label was placed on Jeb, it completely reframed how you saw him. You just couldn't see him any other way, especially when you compare his energy, that calm energy, to Donald Trump's energy, right?
This is a tough business to run for president.
I know, you're a tough guy, Jeb.
And we need to have a leader that is
real tough.
You're never property from an elderly woman.
Let me talk. Quiet.
How tough
a lot
is
of
it?
times. Excuse me. 1 second.
No.
I didn't want to.
Donald, you cannot take
more energy tonight. I like that. Look.
There's always a physical element. Do they look it?
I think the next president needs to be a lot quieter, but send a signal that we're prepared to act in the national security interests of this country, to get back in the business of creating a more peaceful world. Please clap.
You know what's happening to Jeb's crowd, as you know, right down the street? They're sleeping. They're sleeping now.
His whole brand is built on high energy, strength, and power. In fact, Donald Trump's energy looked even bigger when you compared it to Jeb's lower, calmer energy. Now, don't miss how tremendously persuasive this strategy really was. We first see Jeb's calm energy as a positive indicator that he would be cool and collected, especially in a stressful situation like that of the presidency.
That's my case, is that I have a steady hand.
But once Trump reframes it as low energy, we then begin to see that same calm energy as weakness, and that perhaps he might not have the stamina to fight for the important issues like immigration reform, healthcare reform, and terrorism. The very issues that Trump made polarizing emotional statements about so much that everyone started to pay attention to them.
If we are paying attention to something, it's important. That's how we decide to pay attention. But a communicator can reroute our attention to something that isn't important, but make it seem important as a consequence.
And then he builds it so it's designed for future confirmation. Every time you see Jeb, you go, yeah, compared to that Trump rally, that's a little low energy.
The thing about a name like this is that it employs something all humans have: confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is in and around us all the time and happening to us without our knowledge.
Among the drivers of human decision-making are reality filters like confirmation bias, with which we interpret new data to uphold what we already believe. And then they quote you from the book saying confirmation bias isn't an occasional bug in our human operating system. It is the operating system.
The subconscious mind picks up on the things that it recognizes and can identify. It also happens a lot in schools. When one teacher tells another teacher that they had better watch that child because that kid is trouble. See, as soon as that student does anything remotely out of line, it confirms in the mind of the teacher that what she was told about the student was certainly true. And that child will unfortunately, most likely, carry that label throughout their education. Trump knows this. That's what's so brilliant about these names. Now, we can argue about the morality of it later. I'm not condoning it, but its power is apparent. It's also why Scott Adams calls them forever names.
Forever names, when you get your forever name, it isn't going away.
It is literally confirmed almost every time that person speaks forevermore. It is crafted in such a way that when Jeb does Jeb, it automatically reminds everyone of his low energy. All Trump really had to do is find a word that captured something people can physically recognize over and over and over and over again and push it again and again and again and again. That would imaginatively reframe how everyone's subconscious mind associated those same qualities. See, Trump persuaded America that it needed strength and then imaginatively reframed Jeb's low energy as weakness, and in doing so made his high energy a sign of strength, which in the mind of the majority of Republican voters is a no-brainer. And the thing is there is almost no hope of escape, because even when Jeb tries to evoke more energy, it appears artificial and reminds everyone all the more that he is, in fact, low energy Jeb.
Ever ready. It's very high energy, Donald.
Now, Trump didn't just do this once. He did it with beady-eyed, lying Ted, young-looking little Marco, Elizabeth Pocahontas Warren, and the infamous crooked Hillary. We don't have time to go into every one of these, but they demonstrate the persuasive artistry that went into their design. He even A/B tested some of them to see which one would stick better. And just in case you aren't sure whether he knew what he was doing at the time, watch what he says here.
You cannot win in November with those numbers.
Well, I say those numbers are going way up once I start going. I have 2 more people I have to get rid of. I started off with 17, and one by one I knocked them off. And frankly, I have to, I have to do what I have to do. Now, once I start on Hillary, you'll see the numbers change.
Okay, you may be saying, okay, I see it, Roland, I get it. But doesn't this all seem so negative? You're such a positive guy. How can you endorse this kind of behavior? Here's the deal. I don't endorse it. I'm not even saying it's moral. Would I rather people not label people in such negative terms? Of course. And to be honest, I've actually come to the conclusion, as strange as this sounds, but while I was researching Trump, I think Trump himself would prefer not to call people names as well. Let me show you what I mean.
Would you like to be the President of the United States?
I really don't believe I would run it.
Why wouldn't someone like yourself run for political office? You have all the money that you possibly need. You've accomplished a great deal, even though you are only 34. I know there's a lot of things that you possibly can do in the years ahead. Why wouldn't you dedicate yourself to public service?
Because I think it's a very mean life.
So understand that I'm not endorsing this kind of bashing. However, I also recognize and appreciate how well it works. And I believe in results. So how do I build a bridge? How does this make sense? How does this work together? What's the point of all this if you shouldn't use it? How can we use imaginative reframing in our own life? Well, I use it in positive ways with my own employees. I have almost 40 employees on 2 restaurants. I occasionally will tailor nicknames for people to draw out their strengths even more, and so that other employees see those qualities within them. This builds appreciation and belief in a common strength to the team. But most specifically, if I'm going to be honest, I use it internally on myself, within my own mind, so that I can see myself a certain way. The inner dialogue we have with ourselves will determine how we act in the world. If we believe ourselves to be ineffective, lazy, and unmotivated, that is exactly the behavior that we will pick out and notice in ourselves, the same way we pick out and notice the car we drive as we pass it on the road. However, if we literally convince ourselves that we are efficient, productive, and motivated, we also see it reflected in the same way in the world in which we live. I also sometimes make grandiose statements about myself, especially my strengths, but I do it in a joking way. But over time, it does cause people to naturally see those qualities in me, the qualities I want them to see. So I basically imaginatively reframe myself in the eyes of others. Now, a word of warning. If you try to use imaginative reframing on yourself, trying to make people see a quality you are very weak in, it will almost always, most likely, backfire. Think of it like a really big guy being nicknamed Tiny. The word tiny actually points to and confirms how big the guy really is. So be careful when utilizing this skill if you so choose to wield it. Another word of warning, when you speak about someone else, make sure you're not imaginatively reframing that person in a negative light, even within your own psyche. This is often unknowingly the devil in failed relationships. As a person vents, they are imaginatively reframing. They're reimagining and confirming qualities that they don't like about that person, the person they are venting about. This leads them to see those same qualities in more and more and more situations, so much that eventually their entire mental portrait of that person becomes a portrait of everything they dislike. And no one wants to spend time with anyone whom is the embodiment of everything that they do not like, especially themselves. Which brings us to ninja skill number 3, emotional conversation. Alright, so most people believe that when we have a conversation, we listen to what each other says and then we hear them accurately. We then either accept or reject what they say. Well, guess what? That's just not true.
When you become a hypnotist, the first thing you learn is that that's backwards, and that mostly we're deciding based on our team, our feelings, our emotions, irrational reasons we make our decision, and then we rationalize it no matter how tortured that rationalization is.
Everyone hears and sees the world through an emotional filter, and we simply cannot be 100% rational. Ever.
If people vote at a polling place inside a church, they vote more Republican. If they vote at a polling place inside a school, they vote more Democrat. It's the cue that drives you in the direction of what seems more important now because you're focused on it. What new psychology suggests, it's the factor that is top of consciousness at the moment before you make that economic decision that will win the day.
Yeah, persuasion is pretty much all that's happening. You know, we humans ignore facts, but we think we don't. So the great illusion of life is that we're rational beings making rational decisions most of the time.
We like to think our senses tell us the truth and that we are rational beings, but we just aren't. Don't believe me? Remember this dress. What color is it? Is it blue or black or white and gold?
That darn dress, you know the one I'm talking about, dividing the world between those who see white and gold and those who see blue and black. Who sees blue and black? Who sees white and gold? I know there are people out there that say they see blue and black, and those people are crazy. When you can't believe your eyes, what can you believe?
Just remember, whatever color you see, about half the population literally sees it as the other. What about this recording, the famous Yanni versus Laurel controversy?
Laurel.
Oh.
Laurel.
Yanni!
Laurel. Laurel.
Laurel, it's always Laurel for
me. Laurel.
It says Yanni. Every time. Yanni.
Laurel.
So unabashedly, Laurel.
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 Wait, time out.
Did you hear something else?
I never hear Laurel.
Everyone is talking about it. I just posted this on Twitter. I hear Yanni. And I am very surprised that other people hear something else. This blows my mind.
So what do you hear? Yanni or Laurel?
Laurel. Laurel. Laurel.
Twitter data actually shows 47% of people on the site hear Yanni. Ooh, and 53% hear Laurel.
So clearly Laurel.
It's Laurel.
All I hear is Yanni.
Who's Yanni?
I hear Kofefi.
Just remember, whatever you hear, about half the population hears the other. Now, Trump knows that what we see and hear is not necessarily reality. We see people that disagree with us, and we assume that if the other person just had more of the right information, the information we had, they would also come to the same conclusion we are already at. So then, when we attempt to persuade that person next to us, we bombard them with facts and figures and assume that they will change their mind. But that almost never happens. And Trump knows this, too. It isn't good enough to have all the logical, rational arguments. And actually, it's not even important to know them precisely. At least not in terms of persuasion. That was proved by the sheer onslaught of fact-checking that occurred during his campaign, yet it didn't matter. It didn't really matter, did it? It didn't matter. It didn't matter as far as winning the White House.
So early on in the election, I was telling people, don't worry about the fact-checking. It's not going to hurt them at all because facts don't matter. We simply don't use them to make decisions. We just sort of think we do. It's an illusion. And that if he says something that makes you question the viability of somebody and it's not a fact, that feeling of unease stays with you.
This is why persuasion experts typically have such an incredibly low regard for facts and figures as it relates to influencing people's decisions. They just don't waste time getting the nitty-gritty details all worked out. This drives extremely analytical people absolutely insane.
The president's on the campaign trail throwing around falsehoods and prevarications and misleading statements like Johnny Appleseed. He made so many claims worth fact-checking.
We've created 500,000 new manufacturing jobs. In fact, now the number is almost 600,000, and that's since our election.
600,000? No, 408,000. A reminder to all you politicians out there, you're perfectly entitled to your own opinions, but not to your own facts, for the love of God.
They keep seeing a persuasion expert like Trump winning over and over and over again and just can't understand why. And it's not even that they make their decisions 100% logically either. They just think they do. And it's just that they emotionally hold congruency and consistency to such a high degree that when they see what appears from a fact-checking standpoint as a bald-faced lie, they can't accept it. But I hypothesize that Trump understands something they don't. When a master persuader like Trump has an interview or a conversation, he understands that there's really two conversations going on at the same time. What people think they hear and what is actually being said. Now, think of it like this. There is factual conversation. Now, that's the type that's housed in the actual words and phrases we use. This type is the kind we think we're communicating with. But there's another conversation that almost no one knows about. And it's hard to observe. It's what I call emotional conversation. It's the true exchange of ideas that actually takes place, at least in regards to decision making. Let me give you an example. My wife and I were headed home the other day from our business. This is a true story this time. And I mentioned that she should fix this amazing rice that she made the other day. She responded by saying, "No, we're going to clean the house today." I responded by saying, "I'm not going to clean the house all day. I have to work on a video." She responded, "It's not fair that I have to clean and you don't." I responded by saying, "I never said that I wouldn't help clean, just not all day, and that I needed to work." The conversation then went on and became more and more heated throughout the exchange. And if you've ever had a significant other, I'm sure you can understand. Shortly thereafter, I began laughing. Like literally was in the car, I was laughing. And it kind of made her mad, but I realized that when I mentioned her making rice, she emotionally heard it as, "Don't clean house." Because in her mind, that is what she was planning on doing. So she emotionally filtered what I said, and she responded to what she heard with, "No, we're going to clean the house today." Interesting, huh? But now we can't bag on my wife too much. Because guess what? I turned around and did the exact same thing. When she factually said, "No, we're cleaning the house," I emotionally heard her say, "You're not working on your videos today, Rollin. You're going to clean house all day." Now, that's not what she factually said, but that's what I emotionally heard. In truth, she only wanted me to help, not force me to clean all day. I just emotionally heard that. I hallucinated it. So how did I factually respond? "I'm not cleaning house all day." To which she emotionally heard, "You have to do it by yourself, woman." That's not what I said. And on and on and on we go. Now, Trump understands this, and so when it seems he is spouting random numbers, he probably is. But I posit that he sees no need to communicate factually accurate information because people don't hear things that way. He just needs to make sure he speaks emotionally, directionally accurate statements. So he says things like,
We are going to build a great border wall to stop illegal immigration, to stop the gangs and the violence, and to stop the drugs from pouring into our communities.
He knows how to pick a topic that he can put a lot of emotion on. Right? He could have picked the budget. Let's say that was his big thing. But he didn't because he's smart. He picks immigration because you can put all kinds of emotion around that. So part of the magic of his persuasion is he always picks a fight that he can dominate. So he speaks in visual ways. If you look at his immigration plan, he talks about a wall. something you can visualize.
We are building a wall on the southern border, which is absolutely necessary. We will build the wall. We will build a great wall along the southern border. Build that wall. Build that wall. Build that wall.
So had he come in and said, well, I'm the one who's going to be strong on border security. We're going to have a very, a good system, and we'll patch up the parts that need to be patched. You'd be like that in a minute. So he doesn't do that.
I said right from the beginning, we're going to build a wall. It's going to be a real wall. See that ceiling up there? I mean, this is a wall that if you get up there, you're not coming down very easy. We need to build a wall, and it has to be built quickly.
He says it's going to be a wall. And everybody says, it can't be a wall the whole way. There's all kinds of different reasons why it can't be a wall. And then he looks at it and he goes, it's going to be a wall. Wall. It's a big, beautiful wall.
We have to start by building a wall, a big, beautiful, powerful wall.
Well, the people will climb over it. Just got 10 feet taller. It's a wall. Right?
The president of Mexico said they will not, under any circumstances, pay for the wall. They said to me, what is your comment? I said, the wall just got 10 feet higher. It's true.
If you put something in a visual, framework, it's just more powerful. Take healthcare. It's just sort of a concept. But immigration was also sort of a concept until he said wall, wall, wall. The visual of that was so powerful that he's moved the country from, well, that's a ridiculous idea, to, well, we might have a wall.
He just expands his statements to make a harsher emotional impact.
So I think that inconsistencies in his budget, his positions, people largely don't care. He's appealing on an emotional, visceral level that really works very well.
What I mean is that he uses hyperbole, just like your uncle when he caught that fish and said it was this big. It's not factually accurate, but that doesn't matter. You get that it was a big fish. For example, not too long ago, Trump was criticized for saying that a Chevrolet Camaro was costing over $100,000 in China or something like that because of the tariffs on cars. When the fact-checking came out, the only Camaro that sold in China sold for around $58,000, while the equivalent Camaro in the U.S. sold for only $25,000. So in a fact-checking world, he wasn't factually accurate. He didn't have the facts. But in the real world, he was spot on. But why? Because his statement was emotionally directionally accurate. We have an enormous trade deficit with China. Now, what we do about that is up for debate. But to point it out, Trump hyperbolized and inflated the $100,000. And that was just wrong enough, there's that narrow band of wrongness again.
A narrow band of wrongness.
To make us all sit up and pay a little closer attention. This layers ninja trick number 1, polarized emotional attention. Ninja trick number 2, imaginative reframing, on top of his emotional conversational storytelling. See, this comes down to basic 101 negotiations. A salesman throws out an inflated price, the buyer then throws out a lowball offer, and then they haggle until they meet in the middle, attempting to each get the best deal they can. This is how business is done.
If you're going to negotiate, you want to come in with a big first offer, so you have the most room to move back. Don't worry about this immigration stuff. These are his big first offers. He just wants to end up right of center. And as of today, basically, he's already said, I'll take your offer of keeping 800,000 people in the country and, well, just make it 1.8 million. He's actually keeping more people than their offer, all right? So that's moving pretty far, to the middle. And of course, his base is screaming, but they're not going to leave him. He's pretty clever about that.
I used to think it was silly. Why don't the salesman actually just tell the true price they would sell for and the buyer just purchase or not? Well, no one really even knows the true value of anything. Because the true value is really only what someone is willing to spend, not necessarily the cost of the production plus profit. And if you're going to sell your house, or you're going to buy a vehicle, or you're negotiating trade, everyone wants the best deal they can get. They want the most bang for their buck. But because political pundits and fact checkers think facts and figures are what matters to decision making, they freak out when President Trump says things like this.
I will build a great, great wall on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall.
And you remember I said it, and remember this also. Mexico, Sean, is going to pay for the wall.
Who's going to pay for the wall? 100%.
So they think he's insane. But I posit that it's all strategy. It's all persuasion.
And what he does that is persuasion perfect is that, first of all, he makes you think past the decision to who's going to pay for it, right? The Mexico's going to pay for it is just to make you think there's going to be a wall and you're only talking about who's paying for it. You see how often he does it. There's no way that it's, accidental. And if you're thinking about those things, you've already uncritically sort of accidentally accepted that there's something like a wall coming.
He speaks in grandiose ways and embellishes on pretty much everything in order to sell the emotions that is needed to get the ball rolling. He knows the facts will get worked out later during negotiation. In this way, he's actually communicating in a much more effective way because he's selling what really matters. Emotions. Now, please, don't go off and say Rollins says facts don't matter. Don't misunderstand me. Facts do matter towards outcomes, but not in terms of communication, not in terms of attention, not in terms of persuasion. We just simply aren't that rational, as much as we'd like to be.
If I say that my version of reality is true, I'm probably an idiot. Probably an idiot.
Think about it. If we were that rational, no one would ever eat anything bad for them. Why? Because it's rationally bad for their health, and everybody wants to live a long, healthy life. No one would smoke, do drugs, or have accidental pregnancies. People wouldn't disagree on religion and politics if they made all their decisions rationally.
You can see things through a completely different filter, a different movie, if you will, and you can still get to work. You can still eat. You still do all your stuff.
There are extremely smart people out there in almost every area of every debate. They're not all stupid. They're just irrational. Like you and like me. We all are.
The best you can say is that you've got a filter on reality that either does a good job of predicting and making you happy or it doesn't. That's as good as you can do.
We're all biased emotionally. It's not because they're morally corrupt. It is because they take a look at each fact from each emotional point of view. And they're all biased in their assessments. They each argue the truth as they see it while pointing to the same set of facts. So they're not disagreeing on the facts at all. They're disagreeing on what they hear emotionally. Now, this brings me back to you and to me. It brings us back to thought hackers. The best thing we can do as thought hackers is to look at the results of what's actually happening in our life. This is tough sometimes. We have to look deep within ourselves. We have to look and take an honest look. When we see a string of successes in someone else that's not in our life, it's important that we do not rationalize that away. If we lose and they're winning, we better set up and pay attention.
I consider myself left of Bernie socially, but I can't ignore the fact that the president has tremendous persuasion talents. And I'm a trained hypnotist, so I've been studying persuasion for years. And to see somebody operating at that level, whatever you want to think about his policies or the morality or the ethics of any of it, you can make your own decisions on that. But on pure tools and talent, never seen anything like it.
It's not important that we like or even agree with this person or not, or that person, or whoever or whatever. That's what thought hacking is about. What's important is that we learn and take notes so that we can pick out the thoughts that drive the actions that give them the results that they have. See, that's when we can reverse engineer what makes them unique and deliver those results to our life. That's being open-minded. That's being humble. That's being smart. That's being a thought hacker. Now, I hope you enjoyed the 3 ninja skills. Now, don't forget to comment and subscribe if you like this video. And again, I want to shout out to Scott Adams' book, Win Bigly, and Robert Cialdini's book, Persuasion, because this video would not be possible without them. Also, let me know down in the comments who or what you would like us to thought hack next. Now, until next time, this is Rollin' Banana. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you can benefit from more episodes of ThoughtHacker Secrets.